Welcome to the Sincerely God podcast. I'm Sarah, and I believe that God is speaking to all of us all the time and in many different ways. The primary way that I listen is through two-way journaling. And on this podcast, I share excerpts from my journaling time with God, which are really inspirational messages spoken from the perspective of God to you. I'll talk more about what two-way journaling is and explore other methods which may be helpful for you to listen to God in your own unique way. I'm just an ordinary person who gets to hear from an extraordinary God, and I believe you can too. Thanks for joining. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sincerely God podcast. So today I'm going to share just a short little excerpt that really speaks to a little bit of what God has been trying to unravel in me. I am very much a planner. I like to be organized. I like to have everything, every detail laid out in advance. And that's something that, although it can be very good and helpful and a positive thing, it can also, I think it can get in the way of maybe what God wants to do, but it also requires a lot of effort. And one thing that God has slowly been, teaching me, growing me in, is learning how to let go of some of that pre-planning and having this full organized approach prepared in advance, and to more just flow with His Spirit, right? Go with the flow. And so this goes back to July of 2018, and I was a part of a new care group, support group that was being started at my church at the time. So we were going to be spending some time, a group of us, kind of planning and talking through it. And I wanted to be prepared. And so I was kind of just asking God in my journaling, how should I prepare for this meeting? And although His response is a little bit direct to that specific question at that situation and time, there's so much in it that really has been a continuous theme, and even into today, that He's continuously reminding me of. And if you have some similar tendencies to maybe pre-plan and have all of those things organized and laid out, I think this might be helpful for you as well. So He says, "My child, do not be so concerned about the details. Just follow me and do my will. It is as simple as that. This group is my will, so I will make it happen. I am well pleased by your efforts and seeking my will, but you forget that I am in control. I will provide all you need. Simply come, meet with me. Invite me into your midst, my child. I will be with you tomorrow and I will be with you Thursday. Simply invite me into your discussion and I will be in your midst. I will guide your discussion and bring new ideas and solutions. Invite me in, my child. Invite me and see me move. Isn't this what you have been asking for? Don't you desire to see my Spirit lead and guide and move in powerful ways? Then come and see. Do not prepare so much that you leave no room for my Spirit to flow freely according to the desires of my heart. Have a tentative plan, but hold it loosely. Hold all your plans loosely, my child. I will lead the way. I will be your guide. Look at your plans that you already prepared. Is there anything missing? What else can you do to prepare? You have already done what is needed. Simply invite me in and enjoy my presence. Enjoy watching and being a part of my Spirit at work." So I think there's so much here that really applies to all aspects of life, but in this situation, it can apply in each individual situation and microcosm, right, of our entire lives. So this idea of, first of all, don't be so caught up in the details. This is a difficulty of mine. I am a details person. I like details, but I can get so caught up in them that I lose the bigger picture, or I lose what's most important. If you think about, I'm a very task-oriented person. That's part of my temperament, my personality, but getting so focused on the task sometimes takes my attention away from what is most important, which is really the person, the people, whether that's connecting, right? In this case, it was a group discussion, a meeting, connecting one-on-one or one-to-many in that situation, but also the people that this is for, right? In this case, we were planning a group that was intended to be a support for women that are facing different types of chronic pain. So if we get so caught up in the details, if we get so caught up in the tasks and the planning, sometimes we can lose what's more important, which is the person, the people that we're trying to help, and of course, God moving in that space. So if you happen to be a details person like me, it's just a good reminder. No, knowing details and desiring those details, like that's not a bad thing. It's just be aware of what your natural tendency is so that you can create space and kind of balance when it's appropriate. And then this idea of just simply follow God. Follow, depending on what your exact idea of God looks like, that could be following that most authentic, truest part of you. But the idea is follow that. Create space for God to move and trust that He's already there, right? So many times we forget that God goes before us. He goes behind us. He goes beside us. Wherever we are, God is there with us. And it's more about tuning our awareness to Him, making space to allow Him to speak. And sometimes that may mean allowing for awkward silences. Maybe that means creating space in your schedule. That could be from your day-to-day, how you fill your life, right? Creating a buffer space in your schedule so that you have room to change a plan or to even just spend time in nature, right? Take a little break and feel the warmth of the sun on your face, like creating space for that. But also creating space for that maybe in a meeting. If you have a time that you're planning, whether it's meeting with somebody one-on-one or leading an actual group discussion, thinking about that, being intentional about that. If God is already there with you, how can you create space to allow Him to move, to flow, to speak to you, but also to speak to the other people who are in that room with you? So I really just, that reminder has been super important for me. And He just says, invite me into your midst. And I think that's a key aspect too, is invite Him, be intentional in that. Pray before you go pray when you're doing your pre-planning, invite Him into that process. Pray as you're walking into that meeting. It doesn't have to be with other people who have the same beliefs as you. It can be in your workplace. It can be in the parent meeting at your school. You can have that prayer inside yourself to say, God, I invite you into this space. And remember that wherever you are, God is with you. God is in you. And so wherever you are, God is. And so you don't have to have one other, believer in the room. You don't have to have one other person that has the same awareness of who God is in that space. You do. And so you can set that intention and you can invite Him in. And yes, we have different amounts of control over a situation or circumstance to be able to create a meeting agenda that allows for that space. But no matter what role that you have and how much responsibility or control that you have, in whatever you have, invite God into that. And that can be moment by moment, even if you're having a difficult conversation with a friend or you're in a moment with your child where you're having to maybe discipline or anything like that, having that internal dialogue with God, even if it's just a simple, God, be in this space. God, help me. God, have your way. And those simple prayers are powerful. And God can come in and He can settle your heart. He can give you ideas and thoughts in your mind. He can bring a supernatural peace to the environment. So just that reminder to be intentional about inviting Him in. And that can be a moment by moment, right? In this example of a meeting, a group discussion, but it's also in our entire lives, right? Invite Him in. Even this morning, I was just doing some journaling with God. That's my typical kind of quiet time, is my stillness practice is the two-way journaling. And I was just asking Him, what's your desire? What's your purpose for this current month that we're in, this present moment in time? What's your intention? What's your purpose, your goal, right? For me, for the people that are around me that I have an influence on. And just, right, I'm inviting Him in. I'm taking time to say, I want to know what your plans are so I can align to those, so I can make space for that, so I can be aware of how you're already moving. And that's something that really you can do in so many different ways. So I just encourage you to try to be a little more intentional in just that aspect of inviting him in. Even that simple prayer of, God, I invite you into this. That can set an intention within your own heart, within your own mind. And then this aspect of, do not prepare so much that you leave no room for my spirit to flow freely. Like, don't prepare so much that you leave no room. And for me, this aspect of not preparing so much has been twofold. One, it has absolutely been to leave room for God to flow. Like, allow the discussion, again, whether that's one-on-one or in a group, allowing space for it to flow where it needs to flow. And you invite God in, but then you expect him to show up. You expect him to guide that conversation, to create space, to share ideas and solutions. And I do think there's an aspect of, there's some planning, right? You want to be able to step into that space with a little bit of a framework, maybe kind of what the end goal is. Maybe there's a little bit, if you're the one that's creating the agenda, right? There might be some key answers that you need to accomplish during that time. And so having a little bit of a framework, so there's some preparation. But for me, I have a tendency to go much more into the details. And so I've got to scale way back from my natural tendency. So creating that space, a minimum framework, but then creating space for God to flow in that, his spirit to flow in that. But also the other aspect has been to not spend so much time planning, to not spend so much time preparing, to not put so much effort in that. And honestly, I think that's been the biggest impact for me personally, is it can be easier. It is actually easier than I tend to make it out to be. And that's something that God continuously tells me. He tells me, go on your way with ease, do as you please. Like, you make things harder than they need to be. You make things more complicated than they actually are. And so recognizing that I don't need to spend hours preparing, pre-planning all of these things. Like, I can have a basic framework, and then I can trust that God will meet me there. And I've had a lot of examples in my own life where I've stepped into situations where really the intention is for God's spirit to flow freely. And so there's really not an agenda at all, but I'm the one who's kind of responsible. And so stepping into that space of, okay, people are going to be looking to me. They're going to be expecting me to lead. They're going to be looking to me to kind of guide this time, and being able to kind of step past my own fears, insecurities, to step into that with confidence, to know, number one, it's okay if there's awkwardness. It's okay if things don't go perfectly, that my personal worth and value is not dependent upon what is, quote unquote, successful or looks like it went smoothly. So being able to really put my identity in God and not in performance or outcomes, and having confidence that God will show up. And I've had a lot of moments where I'll be in one of those situations, just I guess to give a little more context, I try to host on a regular basis time for friends to come together and really just welcome God's Spirit in a way that can look different. Really practicing different, what kind of in the church world we call gifts of the Spirit. So more supernatural ways that God is moving in and through us. And a lot of that is what I talk about on this podcast, of ways that we can hear from God, right? Whether that's visions or receiving thoughts in your mind, being able to have a safe space where you can kind of practice that and get feedback from each other, because it does take a little bit of building confidence and learning how to recognize, right? Sometimes we have images come into our mind or thoughts come into our mind, and we're not sure if that comes directly from us or if that's coming from God. And so creating a space where we can kind of test out that flow and know that we're in a safe environment, that we don't have to be perfect and we give each other grace. So a lot of times we'll have, let's say, this kind of, I call it like a prayer time, that there's awkward silences, and I'll have moments where I'm just like, okay, God, Am I supposed to say anything? Am I supposed to maybe prompt something? Maybe that's saying, hey, let's pray for this, or asking, someone a question. And oftentimes I'll have those moments where I'm just kind of internally trying to check with God, and I'm not sure if I'm hearing anything, and I'm not getting anything clear. So I kind of just stay in that awkward silence. And then someone else will speak up, and they'll share what kind of God's putting on their heart, or what they're sensing from God in the way that they hear from God. And it's this beautiful thing where someone else gets to step out, and really what their message is, or what they're prompted to share, is exactly what's needed in that moment. And maybe it's just them asking for help, or prayer in something that they're struggling with, or maybe it's they're sharing for another person. But there's been a lot of those moments where I'm in this space of internally second guessing myself, and like kind of worrying, right? I'm doing that planning, and what do I need to do in this moment? And when I just sit long enough in that kind of awkward silence, someone else will speak up, and the meeting, the group time that we're having together will flow exactly the way that God's Spirit intended it to flow. So I just encourage you in that, even if you're not a natural pre-planner, still just learning how to have that confidence when you step into a situation, to invite God in and to know that He is with you, and expect Him to show up, expect His Spirit to flow, and create that awareness, kind of that posture in your own heart of like, okay, God, I want to be open to whatever you're doing in this moment. And that may be something that you're speaking to me directly, or that may be something that you are working through another person, but just having this intention that God is there and He's moving. And then this clear, aspect of, okay, have a tentative plan, but hold it loosely. Hold all your plans loosely. And yes, in this situation, it's speaking at least in part to the specific meeting that I was asking about, but really that applies to your entire life. Hold your plans loosely. I forget, there's a scripture that says something about like, man creates a plan, but God guides his steps. I'm totally butchering it's a proverb. Maybe I'll throw it in later in the show notes or something. But this idea, like, yes, God created us with creativity, with the ability to set goals and make plans and move forward in these things, especially desires that He's put on our hearts, right? But hold those plans loosely. So many times I've had instances where it's like, okay, God, I believe you've given me this thing. And maybe it's a promise. Maybe it's a promise that God has spoken, and He said, like, this is going to happen. I want you to walk down this path. And so I hold it, but I have to hold it with open hands. I have to hold it loosely to say, okay, God, I'm going to do my best to follow what I feel like you're telling me to follow. But I understand that plans can change. I understand that you may have a different approach. Maybe it's the end result is exactly what He promised, but the path to get there looks very different than what I had planned, what I expected it to look like. And so holding those plans loosely, or maybe it's just desires that you have in your heart that you believe are from God, but holding those desires loosely, and your plans to get to those desires loosely, to say, okay, God, I'm going to make plans and I'm going to move forward. I'm going to take these steps forward. But I also trust that you have a bigger picture, you have a bigger plan, and sometimes that may require me to detour. That may require me to change what I'm going after in this specific moment. And that can apply to just, all right, your day-to-day, creating that margin in your schedule to say, okay, God, if you want to change what my day looks like today because you have a person that you want me to meet, you have an opportunity you want me to take advantage of. And so having that intentionality, and it is in a, call it a day by day or even a moment by moment, but it's absolutely in that broader overall life perspective of I hold this life loosely, Lord, that every day that I have is a gift from you. And so I'm going to be grateful for it. I'm going to enjoy this day that you've given me. And I am going to move towards these longer term plans, but I'm not going to miss out on the gifts of today because I am so overly focused on this exact path forward that I have created or that I believe you've told me, but I recognize that I'm always going to be flowing with your spirit, and that may look different day to day, and I may need to go left when I was planning to go right. And that's certainly been a long-term lesson for me. I've had big things in my life where I've had to say, okay, God, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to trust you for this big thing. And I will admit, I have had a lot of moments where it's been very hard. I've had a lot of moments where I'm not sure if I'm taking those correct steps. I'm not sure where I'm going to end up. I'm trusting him. I'm believing in some of the things that he's promised, but I have to hold them loosely because I don't know what tomorrow brings. I don't know exactly what this path looks like. And if you consider, it's so far beyond, right? It's too complicated really for me to wrap my mind around, but this life is full of so many complexities. And you think of just the tiniest aspect of your one life and all of the people that you interact with in a day, let alone a lifespan, and how their decisions impact you. And so there's this constant movement, there's this constant web of connections, and it's constantly moving and shifting, and only God has the capacity to be able to see, understand, and grasp that overarching web of every single person in the entire world and in a lifetime, let alone human history. And so we have to hold things loosely because maybe that promise God gave me yesterday, or that guidance God gave me yesterday, was based on a person's decision to go this way, and now they've decided to go another way. And I know, it's hard to say that if you say, well, God knows the future, God knows what decision this person's going to make. It is so far beyond my ability to comprehend. I'm not even going to try to go there. I just know that there is mystery. I know that there are things that are beyond my human understanding. And so as much as I can, I want to hold things loosely, and I want to walk every day, every moment, as closely with God as I can, as open and aware of his presence with me, and listening as best I can. And I certainly do not get it right all the time. I have many moments where I realize, usually in hindsight, of wow, I made that decision, I had that conversation, I did that action out of fear, out of insecurity, out of my own grasping at control, rather than because I was listening and I was aligning my heart to God's heart in that moment. So we're all a work in progress. We're never going to be perfect, but just having that intentionality to say hey, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to set my intention on you. I'm going to invite you in to my day, to my meeting, to my life, and expect him to show up. Expect God's Spirit to move in your life, to move in every situation. The more intentional that you can be in that, I think the more you'll start to see as it's happening. I think it starts by being able to look in hindsight and seeing oh yeah, God, you moved in that situation. But eventually you even start recognizing it as it's happening. And that's a really cool thing, is to be able to see how God is just moving. And sometimes it's seeing it in a friend or just another person that's around you, but it's a really special thing. So I just encourage you, take some time to evaluate, how often do you actually invite God in? How much effort, time, mental energy do you spend preparing and planning things? And is there space there to maybe pull back on that a little bit? And how often do you set an intention, maybe when you walk into a meeting, of God, I invite you into this space? So take a little time to maybe evaluate, ask God, hey, is there space for me here to grow, to step further into what you desire for me? And then start taking those baby steps forward. And maybe there's a little bit of asking God, hey, show me where you've moved in the past. Show me how this has been, how you've moved, how your Spirit has moved in a prior situation, in a prior season in my life, and see what memories He brings to mind. And that might help you have a little more confidence and have a better eye to see how He's moving even today. So thank you for tuning in today, and I just pray that you would continue to see God's Spirit flowing freely in your life and the lives of those around you. Thanks for tuning in to the Sincerely God podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you'd like more information, you can go to my website, sincerelygod.com. There you'll find links to my social media, as well as an ability to get your own copy of Sincerely God, a collection of quotes, either the book or the prayer journal. Until next time, keep listening to how God is speaking to you.